very poor sales in its home market, but far better success abroad. Such was the case with the Daimler Freeline. While somewhat forgotten, it may have been the model for another manufacturer's bus. This is the story of the Daimler Freeline, the lesser-known bus that set the stage for the Leyland Worldmaster. Hi, this is Jeffrey. Now, in my last video, we looked at the Leyland Worldmaster. Now, the Leyland Worldmaster was a bus that did very poorly in its home market of the UK, but did very, very well abroad. Now, even before the Worldmaster, there was another bus that had similar characteristics where it did well abroad but not in the UK, and that was the Daimler Freeline. No, not the Fleet Line, the Freeline. Now, the Freeline was a bus that is somewhat forgotten about. You don't hear too much about it. You don't read too much about it. You generally don't see too many pictures of it. But that doesn't mean that we'll forget about it. And it was a very interesting bus in its own right. So let's get started in taking a look at the Daimler Freeline. In April of 1950, Daimler announced that it would build an underfloor-engined bus and coach chassis. This was to be called the Freeline. It was the first of only 3 Daimler PSV models to have a name, as well as an alphanumeric identity. The others were the Daimler Fleetline and the Daimler Roadliner. The first 2 Freelines were demonstrators. The first was sent to H.V. Burlingham for bodying to the Seagull coach style in March of 1951. The second was bodied by Duple Coach Builders in Hendon. It was exhibited on the Daimler stand at the 1951 Scottish Motor Show at the Kelvin Hall in Glasgow, in the livery of Edinburgh Corporation, whose general manager was eager to trial standy single-deckers on busier routes. Like its Leyland and AEC rivals, the Freeline had a high, straight ladder frame made of substantial steel channel section with an optional rear drop frame extension for luggage boots on coaches or standy platforms for urban buses. Now, let's take a look at some of the general specifications of the Freeline. Number 1. Length was 30 feet for home versions and 33 or 36 feet for exports. The 36-foot length was introduced in 1954. Number 2. Wheelbase for the home market was 16 feet 4 inches. Exports were 17 foot 6 inches or 20 feet 4 inches, where the 36-foot length was permitted. Number 3. Engine choices were A. The Daimler D650H 10.5 liter. B. The Gardner 6HLW. These vehicles were coded G6HS. Or C. The Gardner 5HLW. These vehicles were coded G5HS. Braking was originally full power hydraulic on the controversial Lockheed Automotive Products continuous flow system. The hydraulic system was unpopular with operators, and air braking was quietly introduced as an option in 1952. Originally, the transmission was a Daimler 5-speed pre-selector type, but from 1957, the Dynamic Direct Operating Semi-Automatic Transmission was available with 4 forward speeds, and this, with either electro-pneumatic or direct air change speed mechanism, soon became standard. Drive in both cases came from the engine through a remotely mounted fluid flywheel. The radiator was mounted vertically, directly behind the front wheels, and the semi-elliptic leaf springs were of substantial construction. It soon became clear that the Freeline, like the Regal 4, Royal Tiger, and Guy Arab UF, was over-engineered for UK operating conditions. A typical-bodied 39-seat coach could weigh more than a 60-seat half-cab double-decker bus. Leyland, AEC, and Guy developed lightweight chassis for the home market, but there was not to be a Daimler equivalent to the Leyland Tiger Cub AEC Reliance or Guy Arab LUF. Jeffrey Hilditch, a well-known and respected passenger transport manager who ordered the last Freelines built, expressed regret that Daimler did not build such a vehicle. Due to the heavy weight of the Freeline, its sales in the home market were disappointing. In Daimler's core market, in the British municipal sector, sales were little short of disastrous. The corporation fleets who purchased the Freeline were: number 1, SHMD, who purchased one with a Northern Counties body in 1952. Number 2, Glasgow, who purchased one with an Alexander body in 1953. Number 3, Cleethorpes, who purchased two with row body work in 1953 and 1955. Number 4, Swindon, who purchased 4 with Park Royal bodies in 1954. Number 5, Coventry, who purchased 3 with Willowbrook bodies in 1959. And 6, Great Yarmouth, who purchased 8 with row body work in 1962 and 1964, all for a total of 19 chassis. Edinburgh Corporation had extended loan of LRW 377, Daimler's demonstrator G6HS with a body by Duple Coach Builders, to a 30-seat dual-door standee layout with doors at front and rear, but they did not purchase it. When Daimler finished with it, it was sold to Samuel Ledgard, who added 6 more seats but frequently found the brake system problematic. The SHMD, Glasgow, and Swindon Freelines carried center entrance standee bus bodies with 30 to 34 seats, the Cleethorpes ones having 43 seats and being fitted with front doors. The Coventry examples were C41F coaches, as Coventry, unusually for a corporation, had authorization to hire coaches to the general public. So did Great Yarmouth, whose 2 batches had DP43F bodies by row, the second batch with Alexander-style double curvature windscreens. For Daimler, in the first half of the 1950s, there were a number of private coach operators who were impressed by the large-engined Freeline's power, which had 25 brake horsepower more than Leyland and AEC. Around 50 D650HS vehicles entered service in the UK as private operator coaches by the middle of the decade, although sales dropped off later. The hydraulic braking system used originally provided the greatest assistance to the driver at higher road speeds, and it did not respond well to repeated stop-start operation. This aspect of the Freeline's character perhaps explains its aptness to coaching applications. Builders of home market coaches on the Freeline chassis included Bell House Hartwell, H.V. Burlingham, Duple, Man Egerton, Plaxton, and Willowbrook. St. Helens Cooperative Society were the purchaser of the Man Egerton bodied coach. This was to the Crellin Duplex patented half-deck layout. And you can watch my video on the Crellin Duplex coach to find out more about this unique design. However, it was exports where the Freeline was most successful. Auckland Transport Board of Auckland, New Zealand was the greatest foreign purchaser of the Freeline, buying 160 of the D650HS model between 1952 and 1958, all being 33 feet long with front and center doors and luggage boxes below the saloon floor in the wheelbase outboard of the frames. The first was exported completely built up with a Saunders row body. The other 89 of the initial batch were completely knocked down kits, which were assembled in New Zealand. The second batch of 70 from 1956 to 1958 were locally bodied. The Daimlers had weaknesses prone to overheating, but they were better performers than their diesel rivals and became the backbone of the Auckland fleet until the early 1970s and remained in service until 1983. Other export markets for the Freeline included Australia, Belgium, India, Israel, Nigeria, Norway, Portugal, Spain, and South Africa. The buses for Bombay were the only examples of the 5-cylinder G5HS model built. A total of 650 Freelines were built, 558 of which were exported. The last Freelines were built in 1964. There were also so-called fake Freelines. In 1968, CCFL in Lisbon received 26 underfloor-engined single-deckers, which were described as Daimler CV-U6LX. They were actually Guy Victories, powered by Gardner 6HLX engines, Jaguar having decided to badge engineer in this way, as Daimler was the better-known brand in Portugal, and these buses were delivered along with a consignment of fleet lines for the same operator. There are at least several Freelines in preservation throughout the world. In the UK, only 120 JRB Blue Bus Service of Willington is preserved and is currently the subject of an extensive restoration. In New Zealand, the Museum of Transport and Technology has preserved Auckland Transport Board Prototype number 201. At least 2 other ATB buses, including 215 and 511, are in private preservation in New Zealand. 511, built in 1956, is with ARA Heritage buses having been a camper and is to be restored as a passenger carrying bus once again. In Australia, 2 have been preserved by the Bus Preservation Society of Western Australia, Perth. These were from the batch of 20 Freelines bodied by Howard Porter for the Western Australian Government tramways in 1957 and 1958. And so, that is the story of the Daimler Freeline, the bus that may have been somewhat rejected in its home market, but was a modest success elsewhere. In effect, a pre-Worldmaster. So there it is, the story of the Daimler Freeline. Now, as I mentioned previously, the Freeline was sort of like a pre-Worldmaster or maybe even a baby Worldmaster, because while the Worldmaster was meant for global sales, the Freeline was not. And the Freeline just sort of found itself in that position where it did poor at home, but it did much, much better overseas. So have you ever ridden in a Freeline? And if you have, what did you think of it? So anyway, I hope you enjoyed this look at the Daimler Freeline. And as always, thank you so much for watching and have a great day. Bye.